What is up, Fantasyland? We're back in the district. The Pollard Express finally took off from the station in big fashion. A lot of rumors today, a lot of action. NFL GMs watching the show, hashtag always be trading. We got a lot to talk about. Players going all over the league, making it exciting. And we have a huge guest tonight. Guys, let's get to it.
District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? Welcome back to the district for a monster show tonight. We had the NFL trade deadline today, so we're going to dive deep into that. We've got the whole GOAT family. Dan, we were on last, and we completely forgot to thank the fans of the GOAT district, you, the listeners, you who join us in the chat on the weekly. We love you guys. We hit the 600 mark, guys, with our subs. We're trying to get to 1,000. You guys have been awesome with sharing the show, giving us feedback. And we've got Famous Jay in the chat. Guys, we have a huge show tonight. Theo, we said we've got one of our Mount Rushmores when it comes to our guests, one of our favorites for sure. Why don't you walk this man proper?
So this is one of our favorite guests. If you're following fantasy football, you're watching the GOAT District, you know there's no doubt that you follow John DAiGLE on Twitter. John is putting out tremendous work at 444. Both in written context and also putting out, John, about 4 or 5 pods a week now for you?
It is 4 or 5 pods a week, but if you include Discord and everything else, it's actually 10 shows per week.
Yeah, it's been some really, really excellent pods. John does some great ones with John Paulson. He also does some great stuff with Sam Hoppin. The three of them, when it gets together, it's become part of my weekly routine to listen to you three. We also have the great pods you do with Hayden Winks, and you're all over the place. So we're really happy to have you on NFL Trade Deadline Tuesday. We had an awful lot of action. I think you're maybe the ideal guest to kind of navigate us through these crazy trading waters. So we're fired up to have you here. And is there anything else you're putting out that you want to kind of share with the listeners?
It's the waiver wire column, which is updated right now on 444.com, actually, post-trade deadline, and that includes Broncos backfield, Dolphins backfield, everything we'll talk about on this show. I know some people, what's the word I'm looking for here? They prefer to stick to the strictly FFPC talk. I know, Theo, you do a great job with the FFPC high-stakes waivers pod here on this show, but I've always just said, if you can do both, right? If I can talk about these insane leagues. Don't get me wrong. I'm on your side here. Rondale Moore should not be available in leagues. But in these insane leagues where he is available, but then also talk about leagues where Brock Wright, Tanner Hudson should also be picked up, you should do it all. And so I make the waiver wire column for everyone. I don't segregate anyone. And that's the way it's written every week. So it's there for 44.com. And our Halloween sale just ended. But I guarantee if you DM me, I can probably get you a code for at least half off. And for better or worse, we all know over half the season is left, which is still insane to say.
You wear many hats over there at 444, John. You definitely, your name rings true in the high-stakes streets, but you're also helping people in shallower leagues, and that's a very difficult thing to do. And I think it's awesome because your waiver wire this week, a guy we'll get to later on the show, but a guy that's going to be available to people, whether they're in shallow formats or larger formats. Your number one guy this week was Isaiah Likely. Maybe we could just start out. You could kind of share your thoughts on him, and then we get to today's action.
It's a tough situation because the Ravens have one game in the next 20 days. And since we know that they hit bye after Monday night's contest in New Orleans against the Saints, then maybe they do hold out Andrews if he's roughly even 50%. We know Rashad Bateman also going to miss a few weeks. Gus Edwards day-to-day. We'll see what happens to him. But overall, we think we're still wagering fab on Isaiah Likely wherever he's available out there. And I know in some at FFPC, a lot of people held on to him, even though like we've also seen in FFPC, some people like dropped Elijah Moore. That didn't end up mattering, but still dropped Elijah Moore, dropped Treylon Burks. It's wild. It's the Wild West out there, depending on your roster needs. But Isaiah Likely may be out there, and even in one start, we think he can go nuclear, especially with Rashad Bateman out of this lineup overall. We've now gone back and seen him in the preseason likely. And he's recorded on his route since the preseason a elite 24% target per route run rate for 11.5 yards per catch and a 21% target share from both Tyler Huntley and Lamar Jackson in that span. When he's on the field, Isaiah Likely does nothing but produce as legitimately a top 5 tight end, especially because we may now take out we not only have 6 buys this week, but also we may take out T.J. Hawkinson, who as a part-time player, we'll get to that in a bit, in his first game with the Vikings. So overall, if Likely plays on Monday night, I think we're legitimately, if he's starting, I think we're legitimately bidding on a top 5 tight end. And so knowing that we think it's only going to be one game as well, it's tough. It really is tough. But with 6 buys, especially in FFPC, where you can flex him in that range of outcomes, I still want to wage war. I still want to go for him.
We got to get the tight end whisperer, Dan Williamson's take on Isaiah Likely. And I have a follow-up question for all of you guys. Let's say that this is not a Mark Andrews missing. Dan, maybe your thoughts on Likely if we find out Andrews is missing, and then your thoughts on him just basically moving forward.
I'm probably going to have a hard time starting Likely if Andrews plays, just because of the way it's gone so far. Even with Bateman missing games, which we've seen before, that just really hasn't done enough for Likely to really make him that startable. But absolutely, I think he's a guy you've got to be bidding on because of the chance that he can play. And I mean, this week is where the rubber meets the road, because anybody with a pulse on the waiver wire is getting picked up and probably getting thrown into a starting lineup, because there are teams that are just going to be that desperate. Usually in every league, there's going to be one, maybe 2 teams that are real heavy on the week 9 buys, and they're going to have a hard time even just putting together a starting lineup. I may be that guy in a couple leagues, but it's one of the things we just have to deal with. But I think we're also going to find out, what some of the players on your bench mean to you, because of the fact that there are going to be so many week 9 buys. There are going to be times where, you may have to drop a player. You don't want to drop it unless you want to take a 0 to a lineup spot, which is always tough to do in a contest.
Dan, I even wrote about Khalif Raymond, to your point. I wrote about James Cook initially before the trade deadline, the Bills being 12.5-point favorites over the Jets. Like, those are literally the kind of players I'm looking for in deeper leagues. Like right now, when you have so many buys, you have to guess game scripts as well and say, well, if we think the Bills are going to blow out the Jets, then this player, who it's now Nyheim Hines, I guess, assuming he gets cleared for his physical, like this player could play the second half, and those 8 touches mean a lot in the Bimageddon of week 9.
Got to normalize the expression Bimageddon. If anybody listening in the fantasy community, a lot of industry people, let's get it going, because 6 teams on bye is just
insane,
brutal.
Yeah.
It's really brutal. And also, I think that Dan nailed it. It's almost as difficult to kind of gauge which guys to cut as it is which guys to pick up, because you don't want to get burned on having to, like, Andrew, it would be like your literal nightmare to have to drop Treylon Burks this week if you've been holding him for this long. Or like an Elijah Mitchell, I know we've been holding him in certain places. Like that kind of thing it's just brutal, especially if you've been carrying somebody for 4 weeks, and then you're like, oh crap, I need the roster spot. It's just brutal.
And to get further into the niche of FFPC, right? I think you've got to also think about some of your other tournament teams. So I've got one team that's really going to get hit by a bye again, and the team stinks anyways. And from my perspective, I could pick up guys on the waiver wire, but then I'd be potentially dropping somebody that could be, maybe if they turn it around, they could be relevant in tournament play. So I think like for some teams, you kind of got to look at it and say, okay, do I just take zeros because this team is a dud in dead, and that way you're protecting yourself down the road. So I think there's a lot of things to consider, especially when you do the 3-dimensional chess of FFPC.
My toughest decisions this week, and I don't know what I'm doing just yet, but I'm in a situation where the best player for me to drop on one FFPC team is literally Wan'Dale Robinson. And again, I may do it because I'm not a zero guy. Like I think it's egregious to take a zero, but again, for him, I might. And then another situation where I'm going to go over the fence on Brock Wright because there's no other tight end in this one particular league, and we're going to war with everybody. Like I need those points, even though I don't even believe in Brock Wright long term.
That's tough. That's kind of a good segue. We had this massive trade deadline today. I think JD sent out a trade saying that this was the most trades to go down on a trade deadline
10
in quite some time, in like 10 years. John, is that the
10 trades? I believe is the deadline history.
10 trades is the max.
I believe that's the most ever. Yeah.
And then you add on to that, we also had the trades that went down beforehand, which we'll get to. But why don't we start out with a fun one? You're in Chicago. The Bears made a big move to get Chase Claypool. They traded a second-round draft pick. They get Chase Claypool. Maybe you could kind of talk about the fantasy fallout for the Bears. What does this do for Chase Claypool? And what are your thoughts on him short and long term in Chicago?
Lots of moving pieces here. So starting with Claypool in particular, we know in the last couple of weeks, actually, he came out and complained about his depth of target, that he wanted to go back to being used more as a downfield receiver, even though, he has a poor career contested catch rate even coming into this year. But he's still averaging for this team 6.2 targets per game. We don't think that can increase with Chicago's passing volume. Like Chicago's doing what they do best. Justin Fields has averaged over 5.5 design carries per game the past 3 contests, whereas in the first 5 weeks, he averaged just 3.5 design carries per game. And that's what allowed him to be, the last 2 weeks anyways, a top 5 quarterback, was because of a higher rushing floor. And so Claypool certainly helps his offense in real life. But honestly, I really think the only winner from the trade is Justin Fields. Claypool may pop here and there, but I think picking those start-sit decisions is something we don't talk about too often, especially in high-stakes leagues. And picking when to start Chase Claypool on undoubtedly fewer targets. Not only that, but then picking Darnell Mooney, Darnell Mooney's the wide receiver 55 in targets per game with just 5.5. He's the wide receiver 73 in fantasy points per game. He doesn't have a single top 24 finish on the season this year. And so overall, it's like, okay, these guys can pop because they're deep targets. Justin Fields, of course, has the highest attempt rate on 20-plus yard throws of any starter in the league, so he wants to go downfield as well. But when will they hit? When will they catch these coin toss throws? And I just want to go back to Justin Fields rather than trying to prioritize these other players, even though I understand, again, in Week 9, you may have to start them. Fields also, by the way, super interesting because through Week 13, this week on, has the Dolphins, Lions, Falcons, Jets, and Packers. He hits the bye in Week 14 and comes back in a nightmare scenario for us in the playoffs. Eagles and Bills in Weeks 15 and 16. But to get us there, and then you look at what I've been doing is I've been pairing him with Deshaun Watson where I can. And Deshaun Watson not available in all the leagues, but y'all have talked about even on the show, Deshaun Watson's playoff schedule. And I think for Fields to get us there with his higher rushing floor, with more talent around him, and then we toss the baton to Watson in the fantasy playoffs is the way to go here in the stretch for the second half of the season.
Dan, your thoughts on the Claypool move?
Yeah, I'm with John here. I think it's just basically more wheels up on Justin Fields. I don't really think it does a lot for Claypool. I'll be interested to kind of see how it shakes out in the wide receiver rotation in Chicago. Are they going to keep him in the slot? Or are they going to try to move him outside? He's been playing mostly in the slot for Pittsburgh. I think Mooney is probably a better player in the slot than he is outside at times anyway. So I'm hoping there's some job sharing going on there because I think that would probably be better for Mooney. But ultimately, I think this means if you had any thoughts of Equiminius St. Brown or Dante Pettis or anything like that, I mean, for Week 9 they're still viable. But anything past that, no, not really.
Yeah, if people considering Equiminius St. Brown probably are not listeners of the Goat District podcast.
Well, yeah, no, I'm just talking about for the bye week crunch. The 1 week pickup.
And remember, Equanimous St. Brown was actually injured this past game. Like, that's one of the quieter injuries of the week because, it does maybe force Claypool immediately into 2 wide sets, like, if they need that help right now since Byron Pringle also injured.
Right.
And, Andrew, you're going to have to drop your N'Keal Harry shares off this trade.
All of them. Yeah,
all
well,
right?
Well, yeah, two bits of nonsense. One, we can't forget my boy, the Hof, was a huge Equiminius St. Brown guy. But I think that's more for a bit than anything, not to be taken seriously. And I guess, DAiGLE, the other question is you came on before the season. We put on Bears under 6.5 bets right at the end of the podcast. That was the team total giveaway. What you're saying is Chase Claypool doesn't move the needle in terms of the over-under 6.5. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. But and remember, Claypool Claypool had 6 carries in week 1, but since then he doesn't have more than 1 carry in any game this year, and only a carry in general in 2 games. But also, what's funny is that I also said that expecting the Bears to be bad at everything. They are terrible at pass protecting, and a lot of that, like Joe Burrow, can be blamed on Justin Fields, who even going back to Ohio State held on the ball too long. Like Deshaun Watson, his ability to do that is a blessing and a curse. But they are really good at run blocking. Like they're top 5 in ESPN's run blocking win rate metric. Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery both are doing well because I don't know how, but because of this offensive line. And so that's why I want to bet on Justin Fields now, not even for his arm, but maybe they win a few more games, honestly, because of the schedule and solely running. Yeah.
I got worried about the bet. I looked at it because I think they also won the Monday Night Football game when they probably shouldn't have against. Is that against the Packers?
No, it's the Patriots last week. You mean?
Oh no, it's like early. Anyways, earlier in the season. But
the Patriots game still pisses me off because they recovered all 6 fumbles. What team actually does that? That's insane.
Extreme fumble luck.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I've been tracking that 6.5 bet because I put it on right at the end of the podcast.
Okay. We're okay. We're still safe, I think. And Justin Fields is great for fantasy. That's a win-win.
Yeah. So I'm kind of a fan of what Chicago did because you get a younger wide receiver. He's got over 2,000 yards receiving in his career, and he's got that very, very affordable contract. So I think that it was kind of a shrewd move by Chicago. We've been saying they need to go out and get help for Justin Fields. We said it all summer. They were linked to a number of players, and they went out and did it. They got Claypool, and I think it's a nice landing spot for him. Maybe not for fantasy numbers this year, but I think long-term he could be a guy that could really help them next year. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're on their bye week now. How do we see – because Claypool has 50 targets this year or so. He's got I have to double-check that. I believe he's at 50 targets. So we're going to see a condensed target tree. But do we think that his targets are going to go immediately to Pickens, or do we see this as a potential bump for Freiermuth? And Deontay Johnson is already getting a ton of targets. Could he see even more? Maybe we could go around the horn here. Your thoughts on Pittsburgh, John?
Pittsburgh, Pickens is going to be an interesting case study because we know his targets have been dreadful. He's actually run more routes than Claypool the past 2 weeks. So we can still put him on the field for slightly more routes run now that Steven Sims is going to be in the slot. But it genuinely just comes down to how much his volume increases since Right now, 36% of his targets have come 20 yards downfield. And more importantly, Kenny Pickett has the league's lowest completion rate on throws 10 yards downfield and has completed just 26% of his passes with 5 picks for 7.5 yards per attempt on throws 20 yards downfield. Outside of Zach Wilson, Pickett is literally the league's worst downfield thrower, and that's where Pickens gets his targets. So it is worrisome. Those are prayer yards, not air yards, what we call them, because they don't come to fruition. At the same time, if you're giving me now 7 to 10 targets per game, I'll take my chance on those prayers. More prayers equals more opportunity to actually happen and help us out. And so I do think more volume can happen. My only concern is that, and by the way, it's Pat Freiermuth who's already averaging a 24% target share in his last 3 full games from Kenny Pickett. At the same time, though, I just wonder if it's more to Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth's already averaging 8.5 targets in those last 3 full games. But since it is safer where he runs his routes, where he sees his targets, maybe it's just more for him to suddenly become a top 5, top 6 tight end and just stay there weekly. So I think Pickens will be volatile. It's sexy, but I think he'll be more volatile. And I still consider him a wide receiver 3 rest of the season, whereas before we couldn't even really start him, honestly, in FFPC.
That's what we love to hear. We love to hear anything positive, Pat Freiermuth in the GOAT District. And how about he becomes just a top 6 tight end for life? Dan?
Theo's going to be unbearable if Freiermuth gets that kind of target share. Just saying. And it's all right. I'm good with it. I think probably Freiermuth is the most likely one to benefit. But as you said, John, I think just more attempts going to Pickens is going to definitely help him out. I have had to start him in a few FFPC leagues just from injury desperation or whatever, and it did not go well this last week. So I'm hoping for some more targets. I think he got 3 targets last week and didn't get a single catch. So but that Pittsburgh's got a problem at quarterback, and that needs to be fixed.
It's the schedule, and unfortunately the schedule doesn't get any easier moving forward. At the same time, though, that's why we want more volume, because every time we watch Pickens, it's very clear he's the dude. He has to make a Hall of Fame catch to produce, but he's capable of doing that 1 out of every 3 targets. So more volume is a good thing.
He's an alpha. The guy's an alpha, you know?
Let's do an ROS, guys, to kind of segue here. John, do you prefer the Muth or TJ Hawk rest of the season?
It's the Muth, for sure. I still question Hawkinson learning a new playbook and then what happens to him in a new offense. Now, the good thing is Vikings are still top 10 in dropbacks from 11 personnel. They want to use 1 tight end. Irv Smith expected to miss the rest of the season, so we don't think anyone, Johnny Munt included, is coming to take Hawkinson's spot. And you make this deal with 2 picks, including a second rounder, because likely you're going to not only pick up Hawkinson's $9.3 million team option next year, but likely extend him in 2024, assuming he does well. That's why the Lions and Brad Holmes traded him, because they knew they weren't going to pick up that option or extend him. And that's why the Vikings made the deal for him. And so given that there's at least negligent competition around him, especially in the intermediate level of the field where Hawkinson has recorded 25% of his targets this year, I think he does have a higher floor, however quickly he learns the playbook. But Freiermuth has already shown rapport and been so safe. And that was with 3 competent wide receivers. Now we have 2 in Freiermuth. So I take Freiermuth the rest of the season for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Theo, how do you feel about it between Muth and TJ Hawk?
I think that, like, if I'm ranking tight ends rest of season, I would have Freiermuth ahead of Hawkinson. Hawkinson right now is tight end 4 overall in most PPR formats. I think he's going to settle into tight end 8, tight end 9. It's kind of flat after the big 2. I think Hawkinson is safely in there. I think he'll do well in the red zone. I'm excited for Minnesota. I think that we can kind of get to them in a minute, but to me it's Muth. The targets will be there every single week. I think Hawkinson could have some frustrating games, but I think he'll make up for it most weeks and finish inside that tight end 1 line. But Freiermuth legitimately can be a top 5 tight end rest of season.
And at least Freiermuth has done it consistently. Like a lot
Yeah.
of Hawkins' production came down to that career high 178 receiving yards because everyone around him, literally everyone, was ruled out for the game.
And I think Theo touched on, the tight end learning the position in a new offense. We underestimate the time that takes sometimes. Dan, you have anything different on the two tight ends before we get deeper into Minnesota? Your Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, let's move deeper into Minnesota. I think we've covered Muth pretty well.
Yeah.
Unless Andrew has
Good.
anything to add.
Why don't we start with Dan on that one? Dan, what's your initial reaction to what Minnesota did today?
Show some excitement, Dan. Come on, man. Come on.
I think it's a great move for Minnesota. I mean, you're looking around the NFC and you're seeing the Eagles and pretty much nobody else. What do you want the Vikings to do? They see an opportunity here. They're going to go out and seize it. Maybe the Eagles are a better team right now, but a lot of things can happen between now and the end of the year. So you just take that chance and go for it. And clearly, Irv Smith was not what they were hoping for when they drafted him. He has just not been nearly as productive as he needs to be, and especially in that offense. I mean, we've seen what that offense can do with a tight end. They haven't been able to do that with Irv Smith. I mean, even Johnny Munt was starting to pick up targets off of Irv Smith. So that tells us where we're at with Smith. And I think with Hockenson, the nice thing is in the short term, you've got to worry about, can he get enough targets while he learns the offense? But in the long term, targets tend to flow to talent, and I think he is definitely more talented than Irv Smith. I think the jury's still out as to whether Hockenson is elite or not. I know there's a lot of people who think he isn't. I think we just haven't really had a chance to see for sure yet.
Dan, that red zone offense is going to be lethal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've got Thielen, and Thielen might be the one potentially most hurt by this. But on the other hand, sometimes when you add talent to an offense, it helps everybody out. So I think in the short term, you start Hockenson if you need to, and probably this week you're going to need to on most teams. I don't love it, but I do have some teams where I'm short enough in buys. I'm going to have to start Hockenson, or I'm going to have to drop somebody I don't want to drop to pick up somebody who probably has no more chance than Hockenson to score anything. But that said, if you got room on your roster, get Johnny Munt, get him in here this week. He's probably going to have a good week or two.
Andrew and JD, do you want to add anything on your thoughts on this move for Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hockenson showed you his ceiling. I mean, all tight ends have that 0.4, right? Which I think Hockenson more or less did in back-to-back weeks after his explosion week. I know it wasn't 0 the first week; maybe it was like 3 or 4 points or whatever. But I think just the fact that he's already shown you the explosion, I think Minnesota's dying to have something as like a number 2 receiving weapon behind Justin Jefferson. Like I know we like Thielen's fine. KJ Osborne's fine, but I think that at this point in Thielen's career, finds all he is. KJ Osborne, he's just a guy. I think that there's plenty of room for Hockenson to run as Justin, as a number 2 behind Justin Jefferson. So I think that's the way we should be looking at him. And again, okay, let's say he's got some boom and bust weeks. I mean, what tight ends don't? Theo, you mentioned it, super flat after Andrews and Kelsey. So you might as well go after it. But yeah, Dan, I like the Munt call for this week until Hockenson gets up to speed.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Dan that I think they make this move because they see themselves as a Super Bowl contender, and I think that the fact that the NFC is just wide open. To me, I would still have them as my 3rd best bet to make the Super Bowl, right ahead of Dallas, but behind San Francisco and Philly. But I mean, anything can happen in those NFL playoffs, and they know that the strength of their team is their offensive side. The defense is all right, but I think that they have enough now that they can win in a shootout against a very good team. When it comes down to it in the playoffs. John, anything to add on your thoughts of what Minnesota did as a franchise and how you anticipate the Vikings offense moving forward?
They saw the Packers play football and said, "This is our year. We're going for it." So no, good on them.
And let's face it, Theo, Irv Smith missing 21 games in 3 seasons. They want a body that'll be on the field. Now you've got one with upside. And Dan, you and I share some Kirk Cousins in Superflex teams. I've got Cousins on a lot of teams. This only helps him adding a big body with, like Hawk to add to the red zone and everything you guys just said. So I was just surprised hearing a couple reactions today, like people not super excited about it. As a fantasy player, I mean, I love this addition to the Vikings offense.
There's a lot of Hawkinson haters out there. I mean,
There's
seriously.
a lot. There's a lot.
There are a lot of people who just really don't think he's good at all. I mean, I don't see it that way. John, what do you think? I mean, where do you think Hawkinson is at talent-wise, just in a vacuum?
Oh, talent-wise, he's incredible. He still has a lot. He's still raw. He still has a lot to piece together. And the issue has been Amon-Ra St. Brown is just the better player. Like, he emerged quicker than Hawkinson did in half the time. And so Amon-Ra St. Brown is the player that eats those targets in the intermediate level of the field, which is why I was just simply down on Hawkinson coming into the year. But that doesn't matter anymore because his scenario has now changed entirely. He's significantly more athletic than Adam Thielen for a team that likes to pass in the shallow and intermediate levels of the field. So sure, if it clicks really quickly, the playbook for Hawkinson, I think he has a much higher ceiling than he did in Detroit, much higher.
And we did see success last year when Zach Ertz was moved to Arizona immediately.
Yep.
So, tight ends can acclimate quickly. They don't always do, but they can. John, can you touch on your thoughts on how this affects the Detroit offense, and maybe a little bit on Khalif Raymond, who I think might have been a sneaky winner today?
Well, Raymond, it's because we keep chasing Josh Reynolds as the team's deep threat, but honestly, like, it's Raymond since week 4, since DJ Chark was initially ruled out and hasn't practiced since, has had a 16.5% target share in that span, and in the last 2 weeks at 75 receiving yards, which is big, especially for, again, the Bimageddon where we have 2 flexes to fill and you're thinking, okay, no one else is available on the waiver wire. I like a receiver who has 75 receiving yards in back-to-back games. That's okay, especially a deep threat who catches balls, whereas we all saw Josh Reynolds drop that deep touchdown this past week. Lions, once again, also in a favorable matchup indoors. So overall, yeah, I like Khalif Raymond as a sneaky pickup, especially for this week. And then Brock Wright is just interesting because we've now seen, since TJ Hawkinson was initially injured last year, he's made 12 appearances for the Lions. And in that span, he does have 3 top 13 starts, but he's been so boom or bust, basically as a timeshare tight end. He's only averaged 2.7 targets and 4.3 fantasy points in 4 career starts for Hawkinson overall. But James Mitchell also involved in this offense, except James Mitchell hasn't run more than 6 routes in any game this year. And so I don't expect Mitchell to immediately jump into Wright's timeshare as a 50-50 tight end room. And that's why, at least for this week when we need him, I'm very interested in Brock Wright.
Dan and Andrew, does everybody love Raymond?
Hey, this week I love him.
Yeah.
No question.
Everybody loves Raymond in week 9. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, just just to show you what some of my teams are like. This is the bench on one of my squads here. I'll throw it up real quick. That's a thing of beauty, right?
What? Describe it, Dan. Describe it for the listeners who are not.
I have 10 bench players. 7 of them are on bye, and Chase Edmonds, Ronnie Rivers, and Michael Thomas are the 3 that are not on bye. In the starting lineup,
just cut Michael Thomas. It's not going to happen.
In the starting lineup, I already have Kadarius Toney, James Cook, Juwan Johnson, Tyquan Thornton.
Wow.
Yeah, this is going to be ugly.
Brian Robinson.
Brian Robinson is ugly. Yeah. I see him.
Yeah, Robinson is
ugly.
Eno
Benjamin also.
And Eno Benjamin, yes. So, Yeah, this team is not winning anything this week.
I think Theo's right. I even put Michael Thomas in the drop list this week. Hasn't practiced since initially got injured. They have egregiously handled that injury, not putting him on IR, and he's already missed 4 games. And so, like, if he gets slapped on IR out of nowhere, like, we're all screwed. We've all just held on to him for too long. So I think this is a week where if you're that desperate, and honestly, maybe you chalk that team up to an L. I don't know. But if you're that desperate, I think this is the week you may cut ties with Michael Thomas.
And that's the sabotage drop too. Now in this time of year, if you drop a big name who you don't have faith in, someone's going to use $300 of fab or more to add that guy. So it's that's an old school sabotage drop. Andrew's been pulling that move since 2004.
No, I'm a sucker for that move. I love when people do it to me. It gets me going.
You love throwing that fab in.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Those are the Jamar Chase, Marquise Brown. Who else do we have? That's current. Oh, Mike Williams. Those situations that happens after this week when they get dropped because they have to.
It's just wild. I saw Hollywood Brown. Shout out to Joe Carlton in the chat. Hollywood Brown was dropped in a couple of NFFC leagues, and I think that he went for 25-30%. So people are not going insane for it. But again, you're spending 30+% on a guy who's not going to be back for a few weeks. It's a bold strategy, but you get people to actually spend it. One trade that went down today that was kind of polarizing because we talked about it a lot we have a couple of high stakes chats, and this trade was talked about there. But I think in Twitter, it seemed like kind of a one that was glanced over. Nyheim Hines was sent to Buffalo. Zach Moss and a day 3 pick were sent back to Indianapolis. I'm a fan of this, and I talked to Andrew this afternoon about it. I think that Nyheim Hines is a sneaky winner today, and I think he landed very well. Interested to hear your thoughts, John, and then maybe, Andrew, you want to share your take, because I thought it was good.
For the Bills, you wouldn't know it, but they actually don't even throw deep as often as last year, first of all, but more importantly, not often at all. Josh Allen is 21st and throws 20 yards deep this year with just 12.5% of his pass attempts. But again, you wouldn't know it because he's completed 55% of those pass attempts for 21 yards per attempt and 7 touchdowns. When they go deep, it's usually because they see a look that they're going to exploit and then take advantage of it and are successful from it. But most of the time, Josh Allen, honestly, is just attacking the shallow and intermediate levels of the field where defenses have been giving him. And Nyheim Hines certainly helps that. Allen has already targeted his running backs at the 13th highest rate this year, and that's with talent we don't consider comparable to Nyheim Hines as a receiving running back. Hines also leads all active running backs in rate of snaps from the slot, 21%. So there are multiple ways for him to get there in this offense especially. He adds another layer to it. And given that Adam Schefter already reported that Hines will be active and play if he passes his physical, and we're assuming that's going to happen, I do definitely think it kills, as you mentioned in the chat, James Cook's dynasty stock. But more importantly, like Hines, I think is a weekly flex value now. Who doesn't want the actual lone pass catching back? Because no one else will compete for it from Josh Allen.
Think about, guys, that game, Theo, where Hines came in and he was supposed to start and he got hurt in the first play of the game. Imagine he had a game that day.
If he just had the Deion Jackson receptions, JD, if he just had the Deion Jackson receptions, yes, I think that the perception would have been. But Andrew, you had another take on this.
Well,
go for it.
I don't know if John was dancing around it, but I mean, I think that James Cook's value may have already been low for this year. I think this kind of tanks Devin Singletary. I mean, he's a bull around the goal line, but from a pass catching perspective, I remember Jonathan Taylor's rookie year, and certainly Jonathan Taylor bigger than Devin Singletary. I think even Hines was getting some goal line passes that he was sneaking through, even in like 1 and 2 yard touchdown passes. In the Jonathan Taylor rookie. So it's not like he can't do it, and the Bills create enough space around the goal line where it's not like he's actually taking those like monstrous hits. So I actually think that Hines I have as somebody who could possibly take over and kind of tank Singletary's value completely. So I'm looking at Hines as like the guy here in Buffalo. as the one that you want.
I saw someone today almost compared to CMC. Sorry, DAiGLE.
No, you're good. I don't know if I have that ceiling for him, but I agree.
Light, CMC light.
CMC, like,
I wasn't saying
20%
CMC. I'm just saying I think that.
What's that small size at Starbucks? The tiny one?
The short.
The short.
I get for my 3-year-old son. I'll get him a short and I'm old.
I do think Devin Singletary definitely becomes boom or bust, right? Like touchdown or RB 40 or beyond. That's it, which makes him like basically unstartable unless there are 6 teams on bye moving forward.
Guys, thoughts on Deion Jackson? I think he becomes suddenly one of the handcuffs to roster at this point, in my opinion. We've already seen what he can do, and Jonathan Taylor's already banged up. I know the Colts have had issues on offense. They switched to a different offensive coordinator, but Deion Jackson has to be one of the bigger winners for this week. Maybe go around the horn. Thoughts, guys?
So
go ahead.
I'll go ahead and throw out that I dropped Deion Jackson in a lot of places on Friday night or Saturday night and Sunday morning to pick up Ronnie Rivers preemptively. That one is going to sting for sure. I really didn't put a lot of credence behind Nyheim Hines moving, so I probably should have held off a little bit on that. Places where I did hold on to Deion Jackson, though, were places where I had Jonathan Taylor, so I was kind of using him as, sort of a handcuff there.
This one did come late, though, Dan. Like, I don't think you can have hindsight on that because Jackson got hurt. Hines played ahead of him. There was no rumors about Hines being moved till about 48 hours ago.
And if you're talking FFPC, Dan, you only have 10 spots, right? It's not like those MFL rosters where we're 25, 30 deep. So I'm with you. In those dinos, I still got them, but FFPC was hard to hold on. But guys, he gave you an RB1 week. RB1, 28 fantasy points. He's shown it. This offense hasn't changed. The opportunity is there. JT doesn't look like JT. He might still be dealing with an injury that'll come back and give Jackson that opportunity again. And now Hines is just not there anymore. So I personally loved what I saw with Jackson. Little bias as a Colts fan, but I really liked that he was like a 3-down back upside behind a guy like JT.
We saw 2 moves on the defensive side of the ball. We want to spend not too long talking about defensive players in the GOAT District. We are not an IDP podcast, for the record. We don't want to go down those streets, but the Ravens and the Ravens made big moves to get Bradley Chubb and Roquan Smith. Do these moves move the needle for you, John, in how you view these teams moving forward?
Yeah, the Dolphins especially needed it. They've actually sent just 4 pass rushers at the league's 2nd lowest rate. They've blitzed at the 7th highest rate. They're depending on extra rushers. And now Bradley Chubb lining them up across from Jalen Phillips. Those 2 players are both top 14 and pressures among defensive ends and edge players this year. So, yes, like that's actually a deadly threat. And for Roquan Smith, it's no surprise. Coming from Ozzie and then Ravens GM skips my mind right now. I can't remember. Ed, someone help me out here. Whatever the case. They built the past decade through their interior, like up the middle. Ray Lewis, CJ Mosley, and now Roquan Smith. No surprise. That's how they're building this defense. It helps this week, too, because I imagine it's enough time to get Roquan Smith limited packages. And what the Saints are doing is literally just, this is probably why they're starting Andy Dalton, because they're telling Andy Dalton, if you run the offense through Alvin Kamara, who has at least 9 targets in 3 consecutive games, like you're okay. Because Jameis Winston wasn't doing that. Winston was just throwing downfield all the time. And so Andy Dalton has actually been efficient because he's dumping the ball off. And so Roquan Smith can help limit that explosiveness that Kamara has. So I think it's happening at the right time. And long term, I bet they do re-sign him in the offseason. So, yeah, I actually think it's 2 impactful moves for these 2 teams.
Eric DeCosta?
It's Eric DeCosta,
Thank you.
yep.
Yes.
And I'll give a quick shout-out to my buddies work for Baltimore Beatdown, which is one of the best Ravens podcasts going and also a good website. There's been some kind of mixed opinions on this. There's some people are very excited that they went out and got an impactful linebacker who's been a very good player in this league. And some people are a little bit upset that they didn't go out and get an offensive skill position player, especially a wide receiver. But it seems like kind of the Ravens view themselves as a team that is going to be different, and I think that adding a linebacker kind of fits their MO. Dan, your thoughts on these two teams making these big defensive moves?
Yeah, I think that probably does not bode well for the Ravens' passing attack, just because, if they've got a better defense, there's going to be less need to pass, and they're definitely lately have been showing they're not that interested in passing. First half of their last game, notwithstanding. But and I think that's going to be good for Miami's defense. I hope it doesn't mean that we don't have some good old Miami shootouts still going on. That would be my main fear for the fantasy repercussions.
As long as they keep it consolidated to our boys, Dan,
Well,
they
yeah,
can.
there is that.
As long as all the touchdowns go to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, then we're good with that.
Short term, they may not have their players. I don't know, but honestly, I still don't really worry about the Ravens' offense, because they'll just do what they did on Thursday, and Harbaugh will throw his hands in the air and say, "Okay, jailbreak Lamar." Just put it in Lamar's hands. Those pass attempts, 38 for Lamar on Thursday, were the fifth most in his entire career. He also had 9 carries to go along with that. Demarcus Robinson, who you should plug in this week, by the way, for Rashad Bateman, had a team high 8 targets. They're honestly, as long as they have Lamar and they give him that many touches, they're going to be fine. They'll be okay. Especially because, I attribute the Raiders' performance on the Raiders more so than a Saints defense that ranks dead last in pressure rate and had allowed 33 points per game the past month leading up to that game against the Raiders. I think the Ravens could score points on Monday night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
We had a big trade last week when Kadarius Toney was sent to Kansas City. We talked about it a little bit last week, but I'm curious your thoughts on it, John, and how you expect the Kansas City offense to look post-bye. I mean, the last time we saw them, they laid a beatdown on the San Francisco 49ers. Now they add another weapon. How do you view them moving forward, and how does Toney fit in?
It really comes down to if he's healthy. That's the running joke, but honestly,
he's healthy. Come on, the guy just he's miraculously cured.
It's really, though, all we have to go on, honestly, because we haven't seen him. We've seen him for 2 plays this year and week 1, and that was just fine. He was explosive in those 2 plays. He got taken off the field immediately afterwards. But we really just have that start in week 4 last year, and then the opening drive, all the way to the opening drive of week 6. And that's when he had 25 targets and 7.3 yards after the catch per reception. That's what we're going off, that kind of talent within a 2.25 week span. And so in this offense that, again, does not throw deep, really relies on their players underneath and someone to take away from the targets Travis Kelce's seeing and the coverage Kelce's seeing. If Toney's healthy, it's an amazing trade. It's an amazing deal. There's really nothing else to say, because it's Kadarius Toney with Patrick Mahomes. But again, I genuinely don't know if young Joka is healthy. I have no idea.
Would you be selling high on him, Dan, right now in Dynasty, or are you riding this Toney Express, all the way and seeing what happens?
Well, this would be theoretical for me because I own no Toney in Dynasty. All my shares are in redraft, but I mean, I would anytime something like that happens, the news happens, I'm going to explore my options and see what can I get for him. Is there somebody who's way higher on him than I am? Then I want to trade to that person. If I'm still the highest person on him, then, we all know how it is with trading. I mean, even when somebody else is high on a player, they're not going to give you what you think you ought to get for them. So it's tough to get the trades done anyway. But Tony's a guy I would definitely throw out there and see if anybody bites on.
Go send it. Go to the Mahomes owner and send an offer with Toney. One thing, Theo, that I find interesting is how you see in the NFL right now different approaches to teams just collecting receivers. You've got on one side the Mahomes, where they're trying to build a receiving core for him, see who he clicks with, keep adding weapons until they get the right fits. And then you have the other side of that, like the Fields, Trevor Lawrence, where they're like, is this the guy? Kind of like, let's give him some weapons, and is this the guy? You've got two different approaches or two different scenarios, but a similar approach in adding these receivers in these offenses. So it's going to be interesting to see how these dominoes fall rest of season, and then beyond that.
I'll just give myself a quick humble brag, guys. Thinking back to a dynasty trade I made in late August, I sent Najee Harris, RIP for anybody holding Najee Harris shares in dynasty. I sent Najee Harris for Travis Etienne and Kadarius Toney, and I'm sure that the manager that made that trade was probably laughing after week 1 and week 2, but you're not laughing now. I'm the one who's laughing. So that I will give myself a little pat on the back for that one.
Yeah.
Speaking of Jacksonville, JD gave us an excellent segue. Because we had the unexpected trade today where Calvin Ridley heads to Andrew Schellenberg's Jacksonville Jaguars. And they gave up, if I'm reading this correctly, it will end up being a 2nd and a 5th if he plays this. Andrew, was that the compensation? It's 2 picks.
There's a bunch of conditions and escalators. To get to the 2nd, he has to be re-signed long-term in Jacksonville. So, like, if they're able to do that, that's still probably a pretty good price for the receiver that he is. But if he doesn't get reinstated by a certain timeline, doesn't meet playing thresholds, doesn't get re-signed, it stays at like a 6th round pick. So I think the 2nd pick has a lot of conditions and escalators on it.
It does, yeah.
And I'm sure you're excited about this, though, Andrew, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and John, I want to get your opinion. What does this say about Jacksonville and their long-term approach with Trevor Lawrence?
Well, I would think they're saying he needs help, and this is the player that will get him there, because Lawrence has averaged just 8 yards per attempt on throws 20 yards downfield this year because no one's delivering. Christian Kirk has caught 4 of 8 targets. But overall, this team has the 18th most passing plays deep. Whereas Calvin Ridley, last time we saw him play, 28% of his targets came 20 yards downfield. Like, he is a deep threat waiting to happen. He's the over-the-top threat they need over Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, who they locked into long-term deals this offseason. So, yeah, I expect Marvin Jones to be gone next year, and then it's Calvin Ridley, presumably, leading this team in routes run, and that's the guy you need deep. So it's just further investment into Lawrence under Doug Peterson.
Dan and Theo knew I was partying Sunday morning. Not because the Jags were playing, just because it was Sunday morning and I was drinking for it.
I mean, Andrew's at the bar every Sunday morning.
That's like right. It's just typical Sunday mornings.
So this was typical.
We were talking with a Jaguars buddy, and it was like, boy, we need to get him a number 1, and then we were insulting to Christian Kirk. Of course, forget the money that we're paying him. I said, well, Christian Kirk's a good wide receiver number 3 on a playoff team. And the question is, okay, is Ridley a good wide receiver 1 for a playoff team, or is he better as a wide receiver 2? That's the question that we reposed to ourselves today. And so I like Ridley a lot, but at the time that he does play next year, if he gets reinstated, that's a year and a half away from football. So until further notice, I am still viewing him as a wide receiver 2. Now, I don't know if Jacksonville can get a true 1 in, but I think that just in terms of, like, as you think about selling the news, JD, right? Like you say, like to say, this obviously provides a bump to his dynasty. I think that there's at least somebody who wants to get him in. Could be tied to a young quarterback. I think just the question is he going to get reinstated, and do you have a selling opportunity here just on this news here today?
It's a massive win, though, for Ridley. I mean, even if you want to consider selling him, he goes from stepping back into an offense that we've seen go running back crazy, not using Kyle Pitts and Drake London, where Calvin Ridley gained multiple rounds of redraft value next year and considerably more dynasty value. I love that they went out and did this. The timing seems super weird that Atlanta would move him at the deadline. Like, I don't know. It seems kind of odd, but I think it's
like the same deal could have been on the table months from now.
I don't know. It's so weird. It's almost like Atlanta's just sitting there and Jacksonville's like, oh, we got to go do something. Let's see if they'll trade us Ridley. It was like a last minute type thing. I don't know. It's just very odd timing. But you've got to love it if you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. They're doing everything they can to help Trevor Lawrence, ascend whether he ever reaches, this elite potential, it's not going to be because Jacksonville hasn't been trying. And that offense, like everything kind of will settle in. Maybe Ridley's not your classic wide receiver 1, but he's close enough to it. Kirk moves into a natural wide receiver 2/3, and then the Zay Jones of the world go down the chart. So I love the fact they did it. Staying in state, what are your thoughts on Jeff Wilson being a Miami Dolphin, John? Raheem Mostert has been a pretty reliable RB2. Do you think Jeff Wilson, would you be worried for your Raheem Mostert shares, or do you think this is just a clear handcuff?
So very quickly, just to rewind, it's fun because Calvin Ridley, I think they made the deal knowing he'll be 28 and do 11.1 million on the final year of his contract. So maybe they don't re-sign him, but honestly, for a player of his stature, do that money given today's receiver market at that age, like look what Tyreek Hill is accomplishing at age 30. Not to say they're the same player, but overall, that's okay. I think it's a great deal for Jacksonville. Also, anytime there's Calvin Ridley news, I think it's hilarious because remember, he got banned for a year for betting on a 10-team parlay. He's one of us. Never forget that.
Yes.
And he was betting against the Jaguars.
Yes. And no, that's the interesting caveat, actually.
Yes.
I forgot about that one.
Yes.
But no, for Jeff Wilson, it's very interesting. Not only because of his obvious familiarity with Mike McDaniel and the 49ers, but also 51% of the Dolphins' running back carries have come from 21 personnel this year with Alec Ingold on the field. And Jeff Wilson has the league's third most attempts from 21 personnel. So for 4.3 yards per carry. So he drops right in to a very familiar stature, very, very familiar offense. And I think he can just, given his status, given what he does, I think he can pick it up immediately. Raheem Mostert, to your point, has handled 70% of the team's running back carries for 5 consecutive games now. Chase Edmonds was second on the team and carries inside the 10-yard line to Raheem Mostert's 4. And that's where I think Wilson really makes an impact, is inside the red zone. So although you still trust Mostert as a low-end RB2, fringe RB2, his ceiling undoubtedly is capped now because Wilson adds to the mix. And so I do think, like, wherever Wilson was rightfully dropped, I don't blame people for dropping Wilson, knowing Elijah Mitchell was right around the corner and Wilson handled back-to-back season lows in San Francisco's touch share in their backfield. I think Wilson is arguably the best long-term pickup on waiver wires right now if he's out there.
You would pick up Wilson before Nyheim Hines?
Oh,
just curious.
Is Hines
well, I'm trying to play that.
I'm just curious, basically, on the running backs move today. Yeah, I realize Hines is not out there in most of these formats,
right?
But
in some he is. No, it's a totally fair question. I haven't thought about it. I think I would still take Hines in PPR leagues, which most leagues are, and I bet Hines has higher weekly consistency, but honestly, given that Mostert's still dealing with an injury right now, Wilson's ceiling's higher. So it kind of depends on your roster build.
Sorry, I was just going to say less chance of injury now that he's out of San Francisco too.
Yeah, that too. Sure. Well, even though like
less hamstring work.
Yeah.
Even though Mostert's playing through injury. Mostert's actually, I think he's only 28 carries away from his career high, by the way. Like
right.
he's kind of just zooming along right now.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I love Jeff Wilson there. I think that's going to be fantastic for him. I think that's going to push really Mostert down to more of a, an RB3, somebody you'd start in the flex maybe if you need to. But I'm going to have trouble, once we get a week or two past today, I'm going to have trouble starting Mostert most likely unless I see something different than I think what I'm going to see, which is I think Wilson is probably going to get more of the attempts, and they're going to kind of save Mostert and make him kind of the change of pace a little bit, which is a role he's always thrived in. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's kind of what my hunch is anyway.
No, I don't. I mean, it's certainly scarier than having, Chase Edmonds and Myles Gaskin behind you. I'm not happy about, for my Raheem Mostert shares, it was kind of like found money. And now it seems like, McDaniel adds a guy that he's familiar with and a guy that we've seen have fantasy success like 6 weeks ago. It's not like Jeff Wilson. We have to like think back in our memories of the time he popped. Like we've seen him put up big fantasy numbers this season. So I think it was a nice move by Miami, and I'm a little worried about how that split's going to go. I think there's also a chance that that neither one of them will be usable because it might become more of a true split in an offense where they're funneling so much to two wide receivers. Dan and Andrew won't like this one, but we've got to talk about Chase Edmonds. Do we have any hope for him now in Denver, John? He's a player Andrew has rostered quite a bit, so we'd like to follow up on that.
That offense is just such a joke. George Payton, not even Hackett. Payton came out today and said Melvin Gordon's a starter. It's none of your business. Get out of here. You're the one who hired, like, arguably the worst coach since Joe Judge, Adam Gase. Like, let him decide. Also, we know Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray the past 2 weeks have matched each other with 25 touches each. Latavius Murray's outscoring Melvin Gordon because he has 4 carries inside the 10-yard line to Melvin Gordon's 2 in that span. And that's where I think Chase Edmonds still gets squeezed out of. Thus, if he's out there in FFPC, again, deeper leagues as well, NFFC, we've had no choice. We've had to pick up and maybe even start Latavius Murray to this point because we've been desperate. I still honestly want Latavius Murray over Chase Edmonds, knowing he has the fruitful role. Edmonds has 8 career carries inside the 5-yard line. He's been pigeonholed for 5 straight seasons for his career out of the goal line. And usually we've seen now one coaching change didn't help that. Usually a second certainly does not either. Once you're in that role, you're in that role for the rest of your NFL career. And so Edmonds may get the 3rd down role and thus give him a higher floor. But overall, gosh, how can you argue for a player who not only ranked dead last in next-gen stats, rushing yards over expected, like under 100 rushing yards compared to what he should have gotten given the gaps he had to run through, but then also is going to a significantly worse offense. Like, I understand usage is important, but it's going to be a 3-headed timeshare, we assume still. So I don't see a rosy outlook for him, honestly, unfortunately.
I mean,
speaking of 3-headed, John DAiGLE, I've got a 3-headed fantasy receipt style meme that I will be unleashing upon Dan and Theo soon.
And also Nelson Sousa. And JJ
and
JJ Zachariason, Nelson Sousa were also roped into this one.
What was it? Let's hear it.
You know that 3-headed dragon meme where there's like 2 like stealth looking dragons that are about to mess up a 3rd goofy looking dragon? Yeah, well, I did a whole meme making fun of myself this summer because I was the goofy-headed dragon because I said I didn't like Chase Edmonds, and Dan more or less I fudged the quote, but more or less Dan was like, Andrew, look all these people who are on Chase Edmonds, and it was all they were on the smart dragons, the goofy dragon.
To be fair, I did like Chase Edmonds, but where I drew the line in the sand was that he got up, remember, to the 6th round at some point. And it's my argument was always, you cannot take Chase Edmonds over Jalen Hurts. That is literally a potential league winner compared to a player who projects as a, at best, low-end RB1. You can't do that. And so that was where I drew the line. Chase Edmonds, obviously, much worse than all of us. Maybe not you, but the rest of us expected.
Not. The goofy dragon is right twice a day.
He got me this summer, too, and I think that's like, we'll have to do like a process episode and look at the busts from this year and kind of try to identify the guys that fit that archetype. I think that's a good show idea because, you nailed it. We expected kind of an outsized role from a guy who had never really shown it and never got work inside the 5. So he got a lot of sharp people this summer, but he didn't get Andrew. And I'll give a hat tip to Andrew on that one. Andrew was
that was the only thing I was right about this year.
If we learn anything from Mike Davis with the Falcons, it's to not throw players in buckets that they don't deserve to be in, that they've never reached before. Like that's really what you need to take away for draft season. And Chase Edmonds kind of fit that bucket where actually he's never been used as this player in 4 seasons in his career. Why would he do it in the 5th season?
As I put out on Twitter a couple times now this year, Chase Edmonds never met the running back he couldn't lose his job to.
Yeah.
So,
it's that simple.
I was definitely on Chase, following the money after he was signed as a free agent. I have boomeranged like a jilted lover on him now. So,
Fordham's finest. Fordham's finest.
Those 12 carries in week 1 look good. We'll always have double-digit carries in week 1.
We felt good week 1. We felt pretty good week 1.
JD.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Theo, let me give a plug to our partners and a little something for those who did go a little heavy on Chase Edmonds and might not be contending right now. But one of the reasons we've got the 600 strong and we've been able to build this awesome community with you guys and drop all this goodness is thanks to our partners at myffpc.com. Guys, if your teams are out right now, you can play on the weekly $35 entry, $200 entry, 2 different tournaments, $10,000 up for grabs. Go check it out, myffpc.com. There's a link in the comments where you can get a sign-up bonus on the site if you're not already on there. Otherwise, go check out the tournament. Lots of fun. Add it to your rosters right now, myffpc.com. Theo, get back to it.
Not a trade. I think we covered all the trades, and we're getting a little deep into the show. But John, we've got to get your reaction to Tony Pollard last week. Now we have Dallas going on to a bye. Tony Pollard rushed for 3 touchdowns. I know you brought this stat up, but Zeke has never done that in his entire career. Maybe you could tell everybody the last Dallas Cowboy to do that. And what can we expect from this offense coming off of the bye week? Are they going to stick with Pollard, or do you think they're going right back to Zeke? I know we saw the quote.
Not only was Tony Pollard the last running back since Julius Jones in 2004 to rush for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, but Tony Pollard actually leads the league in touchdown runs of 50-plus yards since 2020. Even so, after the game, Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones went into defense immediately of Ezekiel Elliott. Mike McCarthy said we have a 1A, 1B situation. Like we have 2 running back ones. And Jerry Jones says this offense goes as Zeke goes, even though it was good to see what Pollard did. I genuinely, after the bye, don't think anything changes. I think Pollard goes right back to his normal 45% share of backfield touches, and he can explode on limited touches like Khalil Herbert. And we've now seen the past 2 games. Herbert is in a timeshare, and he's outperforming David Montgomery because when you give better players the same amount of touches, they will outperform the other player. It's very easy. But there's still this $90 million elephant in the room with Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott's the one who puts his fist to his mouth like he's eating cereal and sells season tickets. And honestly, the organization cares more about that than winning. So I genuinely do not think a single thing changes out of their bye. And that's not what people want to hear, but I think that's the best analysis.
Sell high right now on the Pollard Express?
So for Dynasty or redraft?
In both ways. Touch on Dynasty. We have a lot of listeners that are playing Dynasty, including ourselves.
Dynasty's a little tougher because I do think they bring Zeke back. I really think they bring him back. And Pollard, of course, is an unrestricted free agent. And they have Kevontae Turpin, who is a special teams explosive play waiting to happen. Turpin's so good at his job at punt and kick returning, which remember was Pollard's before. I really do think they let Pollard walk, honestly. I don't think they re-sign him. And what's frustrating about that is that Pollard, we've seen it now, he's even in his last start, beyond this week, last year, he was the RB2 overall in the week in place of Zeke. 12 carries, caught 8 balls. But honestly, in a starting role, Pollard's a top 5 running back in the league. He's that good. And everyone sees it but the organization. And so I'm curious to know where he lands. So redraft, I sell high. Dynasty, I hold and wait to see the outcome and the landing destination.
It's so depressing.
I agree. It's
on the Cowboys. It's
so
annoying. Depressing. It's really depressing and
it
annoying.
Sucks, man. It sucks.
I agree.
And it's just like, we all see it with our own eyes, and the Cowboys are just something else, man. It's just the Jerry Jones looming, because Mike McCarthy, he has a self-preservation to him. He's a head coach. He wants to win ball games. Mike McCarthy wants to go to Tony Pollard. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt here. He's not the brightest bulb among NFL coaches, but come on, man. Dan, what do you think?
That sorry to cut you off, Dan, but
Oh,
that 50-yard touchdown run was impressive. Don't get me wrong, it was amazing. But I think the 20-yard run was even more impressive because like there's limited room to make people miss when you're still behind the line of scrimmage. And Tony Pollard literally broke their ankles when they were still 3 yards away. Like Zeke was looking at all because he's never seen a double move in the last 5 years of his career. Pollard's incredible. It's so fun to watch him play. I'm sorry, Dan.
No, go right ahead. No, the only double move Zeke's seen is his chin, but that's why he has the beard, so nobody else can see it. Theo is giving Mike McCarthy another double chin a lot more credit than I would give him.
A little credit. I said he wasn't a great ball.
You're saying that he would go to a Pollard in a vacuum. I don't think he would. I think McCarthy is just he is stubborn enough to say, nope, we've got 2 running backs. That's the way he likes it. That's what he wants to do. And he knows, of course, Jerry Jones. You know, if Jerry Jones wasn't there, I still think it would probably be 55-45 Pollard over Zeke in Mike McCarthy's world. But since Jerry Jones is there, it's 55-45 in Zeke's favor. And you'll never get Jerry Jones to ever say anything other than Zeke's our guy, because if he does, then he's admitting that he was wrong to give him that contract, and he won't do that. So, yeah, this whole situation is just screwed, and the Cowboys are just dumb enough to let Pollard walk. Mm-hmm. So.
Andrew, what do you have on the Jerry Jones cock tease?
Yeah, I got the I got a sad story for you guys. Hero villain style. You either die young as the Dallas Cowboys backup, or live long enough to see yourself as the 2023 Chase Edmonds. So that's
Fifth round Tony Pollard shares next year and redraft don't hit.
I'm gonna absolutely hate fading him next year when he goes somewhere.
When he's a Houston Texan in a split with Damian Pierce next year.
The only saving grace is that next year's running back free agent market. I don't know if you've seen the list yet. I mean, Saquon Barkley unrestricted, Jamal Williams unrestricted. The list goes on and on and on. Like, there are so many players that will likely get paid more than Tony Pollard. Maybe he ends back up in the Cowboys. Maybe they end up renegotiating and restructuring Elliott's contract. That's really the only saving grace here. Not for my mental health, since I'm just going to be so busy in free agency. The list of players available is absolutely insane, but it's redraft season. We don't need to get there.
It's you know what the scenario that's going to happen is Jerry Jones going to trade up in the first round unnecessarily.
Running back.
Yeah, it's going to be Bijan Robinson. As the next guy. It has to happen. It's the natural move for Jerry to get the Texas running back. Is Travis Etienne the league winner, John?
Yes. Not that anyone dropped him anyways. Like, we were holding on the entire time, knowing he at least had third downs over James Robinson. But now, I mean, just 27 touches this past week, 87% of the team's backfield touches the past 2 games. Also, 5 of his carries this past game went for 10-plus yards. He's showing you has explosiveness, passing chops, and is an every down back. So, yes, assuming he stays healthy, you got him. You lucked into him. And honestly, that's kind of, we know all these rookies eventually play. Fantasy football happens in pockets every single year, and yet everyone only wants to analyze the entire season. Like, it's really just a matter of staying tried and true to your pocket or understanding when to buy high and sell low. And right now, I guarantee you in the offseason, we'll be talking about the last 8 starts for Etienne more than anything.
He's running back 18. Where do you see him finishing among running backs? Do you think he's going to rise up to running back 7? Yeah, Dan's up to running back 3. Andrew's throwing up to 5. There's no ceiling here. It seems like he's on another level right now.
He is currently RB 24 in fantasy points per game. I would imagine he gets up to RB 8 or 9. I would say. I bet he finishes the year. Yeah, I bet he finishes the year overall as like the RB 8 or 9, honestly. A top 10 running back for sure.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome to see it, especially after, we were big on him in the GOAT district, and there was a hard few weeks, but we never wavered, and now we're our Travis Etienne teams are looking a lot better, and I know we have a lot of them in Dynasty.
Took us 8 weeks, but we're finally here, guys.
I have a team where I've been plugging in RB2s, just hoping for the best, with Austin Eckler, RB1, of course, around him. And like now I lucked into Eckler and ETN for the stretch run. Like I have never been happier in my entire life, unless, of course, Marcus Mariota attempts 20 pass attempts every single week. Then maybe I get Kyle Pitts there as well.
Congrats on all the money you're going to win with that team, John. Want to just get your opinion quickly on Indianapolis, JD's Colts. They fired Marcus Brady today. They traded Nyheim Hines. What are your expectations with Frank Reich taking over as the play caller in the Sam Ehlinger-led Colts offense?
Paris Campbell unfortunately disappeared because remember the past 2 games, week 6 and 7, he had over a 20% target share because the Colts had moved to a more up-tempo offense. And unfortunately, we saw them dip back down. Established runs Pat Thorman noted that last week, after leading the league in no huddle in week 6 and 7, in week 8, Sam Ehlinger's first start, they had not a single play from no huddle. They also recorded 54 offensive plays compared to 70 plays per game from weeks 5 through 7. So a totally different offense. The good news is we got a season high 39% target share from Michael Pittman. So Michael Pittman, we were worried about the volume. It stuck around even higher. That's great. We can keep him in there as a reception floor wide receiver 2. But honestly, the running backs are an issue. If it's only Deion Jackson or only Jonathan Taylor, that's fine. Even though Jonathan Taylor, I understand, been very frustrating, even though he even led Nyheim Hines in passing downs on 3rd and 4th down this year and handled 75% of backfield touches prior to his injury. Like he had the usage of Christian McCaffrey. He had everything you want. He's just not scoring touchdowns. But at the same time, Sam Ehlinger comes in and throws to running backs on 12.9% of his attempts compared to Matt Ryan, who threw to this backfield at 25% of his attempts. So we're actually kind of taking away a lot of targets from the running backs as well. And so I do actually worry about Taylor and Deion Jackson's passing game usage. But the good news is I still think Pittman will get us there to the end.
Yeah, it's weird times in Indianapolis. Any hope for Alec Pierce?
I think it's going to be boom or bust, honestly, because at least from Ehlinger, 3 of his 5 targets came 20 yards downfield. But honestly, we probably still need more than that. Otherwise, we just consider him a volatile option. So untapped ceiling, sure, as the only player, literally the only one, getting downfield targets, even of Paris Campbell's 40 receiving yards, over half of them came on 1 target near the line of scrimmage that he just turned upfield for 20-plus yards. So at least Pierce has a ceiling we are aware of, but a weekly start-sit outside of Week 9, I genuinely think will be really tough.
The third worst points per game put up by any team in the NFL, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better. If anything, I just want him to keep losing so we can get something next year, you know?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag for me. I think that Ehlinger, does not look like a disaster, but the offense suddenly becomes slower. It's just an odd concept. I'm not sure, what to make of it. I know that this could be a lost season for Taylor. I think that that's a little bit disappointing, especially if you use the early draft capital, but I think he has injuries lingering. And I think I do respect Frank Reich for doing this move because I think he's kind of fighting for his job. I think if the season goes south, I think he's out of there and now he's going to be calling the plays. So I do give him respect on that. But I'm not sure which way this offense will go.
I think even management might be on the way out after these 3 attempts at quarterback can't help the GM to have his job going in 23. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on. A little bit happier offense to talk about is Miami. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle right now have just been crushing it. Hill is wide receiver 1 overall, and Waddle is right around wide receiver 5. Can they keep up this torrid pace? And just to follow up, John, how is Mike McDaniel so effective at consolidating his target tree and still having his guys put up numbers? The defense knows where the ball is going, and they just can't stop it.
It's actually quite amazing. Even Mike Gesicki this year is third on the team in targets. You wouldn't know it since, as you mentioned, Waddle and Tyreek are soaking up all the targets. But Gesicki only has a 10% target share on the year as well. So it's not like he's doing anything outside of these last 3 games. And even last week, honestly, because remember, 2 weeks ago, for 2 games straight, he ran around over 70% of dropbacks, was getting there back-to-back games, season highs in target share. This past week, went back down to a 57% route participation, unfortunately. Not good for us who bid on Gesicki wherever he was dropped. But honestly, it's just because of what they're doing in the middle of the field. Like, Tua has completed 51% of his passes, 10 to 19 yards within the line of scrimmage because of play calling. And it's just crossers with 2 of the fastest players in the league in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But overall, like, I don't think you can stop that. That's why Tyreek Hill has averaged over 4 yards per route run against man coverage, because how are you going to stop that? The most you can do, even against crossing routes, is double team, bracket, but then you also have Jalen Waddle, and you can't bracket both. So I genuinely do think it's sustainable. I think it just continues. And it's really just a 2-man show with now Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert sprinkled in to complement these 2 receivers.
It's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Tyreek Hill, I know, is 4 150-yard games now. It's just unbelievable how well he's playing.
450-yard games, and then Hill and Waddle have combined for – oh gosh, what is it? It's not. Is it 1688 or is it 1188? That's a big difference, I know, but one of those 2 numbers. I don't have that
it's
one.
A
off
lot.
my head.
It's a lot.
It's
It's one of them.
1688.
I think it's 1688, which is the most in the Super Bowl era among 2 teammates, wide receivers, through the first 8 games of the year.
The Twitter people who said that Tua could not support 2 top 24 wide receivers this past summer and let Jalen Waddle slip in drafts. Tyreek Hill slipped, but I'll give another little hat tip to us. We were all over Waddle this summer, and I'm glad we stuck with him because he's a baller as well. It's like Jalen Waddle is just such an exceptional player, and I think that the Tyreek Hill is getting a little bit more of the attention, but Waddle is just fantastic.
What's crazy too is that they really are wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. They're not 1A, 1B, because Tyreek Hill is getting so much larger of the pie than Waddle. Like, Tyreek Hill's averaging 11.5 targets per game. Waddle's at 7.8. That's a massive difference, and yet they're both getting there every single week.
Guys, anything to add on Miami?
No, just keep it going. I'm loving it.
And Dan, do you enjoy having our team with our Waddle and Hill on the same team? It's not bad.
Oh, yeah, not bad at all. And then we've got another one that's got Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown. So yeah, we've got good things going.
I was going to say we've been good at identifying values at receivers and AJ Brown. I know Dan, AJ Brown 101, but we stayed on AJ Brown when. Yes, even after Philly, it looked like Fantasyland was kind of down on him, but we kept telling the listeners, guys, go out and grab him, and it paid off. He's paid off a few times now, but you gotta. I don't know how you didn't see him popping with this offense ascending and Hurts ascending as a quarterback.
We don't fade talent in the GOAT districts, JD. I mean, it comes down to it is, when it comes to a guy like Pat Freiermuth, Jalen Waddle, all the big names, we don't fade them.
Chase Edmonds.
Only 2 of Jalen Hurts' 10 touchdown passes this year have come in the second half, too, because the Eagles literally don't hang around in the second half. They dominate teams and then pack it in. And it's like, there's going to be a game, and we literally have not had it yet. Because remember, even against the Cowboys and the Cardinals, the Eagles had offensive linemen get injured, and they couldn't pass protect, so they went back to their run-heavy game script. There's going to be a game this year at some point, maybe it's the playoffs, I don't know, that the Eagles have to compete into the second half with their passing attack, and that's the game that A.J. Brown eclipses 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's the game that Dallas Goedert eclipses 100 yards and a touchdown. Like, they will all go absolutely nuclear the moment they have to compete into the second half. I don't know when it is, but it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, that offense is, and I love the fact that they came out like that post bye. I mean, you bring up the how good the offenses looked, but they were just humming. I mean, Brown had 3 first half touchdown receptions. It's unbelievable, and it was post bye. You always like to see these teams when they look good post bye. I think it's a sign of things to come.
And unfortunately, it won't be against the Texans Thursday. We're gonna get a lot of Miles Sanders.
Probably so. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I gotta say the AJ Brown touchdown celebration. It was definitely worth getting flagged 15 yards for, but
You gotta
Absolutely.
not
when you
knocking
when you
those
boss
guys
them, you
out
gotta
like-
point them out.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the 7-10 split, and he's just there. You go, you.
You know, it's the penalties for unsportsmanlike after these amazing touchdowns are just about the stupidest thing.
So dumb.
They
So,
really
I mean,
are.
the DJ Moore and AJ Brown, it's like literally not one person sitting at home is like, there you go, you got him for that one.
Party poopers, man. Party poopers. It's like the missionary of the NFL, right? I will say this, guys. Waiver wires. It's Tuesday. Waiver wires crucial this time of year, especially these big contests. You know, we talk about the FFPC. We got 2 guys on the screen that put out the 2 best waiver wire shows out there. The only 2 that I know that they're the 2 that I make sure I pay attention to on a weekly basis. Theo dropped the OG Livewire today. Another awesome show. Tons of goodness. Our boy John DAiGLE drops it on the weekly. Another one 4 for 4. Guys, I mean, I tell Theo in the DMs, waivers is not the funnest thing to talk about. Let's face it, you know. But both of you guys make it interesting. You make it super entertaining, and you give tons of goodness. So shout out to you guys. Guys, go check out their waiver wire shows. They're both out right now.
Appreciate that, JD.
Thank you.
Talking about waivers is fun. Mass entering waivers in too many fantasy leagues.
It's another thing.
It's not fun. It's horrific. But yeah, it's give us a listen, the OG Livewire, and then John's been dropping his during Monday Night Football. John, right? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, it actually comes out a little earlier on the site. I don't promote it though, because like I'm still, there's still coach speaking news coming out Monday afternoon, and I edit it all the way through Wednesday night. So yeah, it'll be there on the homepage if you want to tune in early. Otherwise, wait till Monday Night Football, and it's there on the site 4for4.com.
So guys, smash the like, smash the subscribe. Make sure you're following John. Make sure you follow all the guys on this screen. I mean, we talked about the 600 subs. We've done hundreds of these shows, even prior to getting on YouTube. I want to thank Andrew, Theo. Theo has been busting it big time. Dan, you guys are awesome to do this with on the regular. You guys have made this channel what it is. We're going to keep bringing you guys the heat, the goodness, all these VIP guests, the best in the industry. You see John on here 4 or 5 times now. We talk about guys like Larky, Muzio. We bring you the best, and we hope that we've helped you win your league so far as we get into week 9. Theo, what do we have coming up in the district? I know we've got a serious lineup coming still.
So we've got some great guests coming up in November. We have Justin Herzig of Establish the Run, a friend of ours in our Dynasty League, one of the better DFS players in the entire world. He's going to be on with us next week. We have Sam Hoppin, who works with John at 4for4, director of analytics at 4for4, one of the extremely sharp guy. I'm really excited to have him in the district for the first time. Then we're going to have Austin R. Martin, who is probably the best Dynasty player in the country. He's going to be joining us in November, another friend of ours. Then we're going to have one more. We've had 2 high-stakes roundtables. They've both been fantastic. And we're going to have our 3rd high-stakes roundtable coming up, I believe, on the 15th with Chris Vaccaro, one of the better NFFC players around. Also does a fantastic podcast on The Athletic. And Abib Agbatoba, one of the better FFPC players around, 2-time Football Guys champion, who also puts out tremendous content on his own podcast, First and 15. So we got a lot coming in the GOAT District.
We got a lot coming. John, remind the peeps where they can find all your goodness and anything else you have coming that they need to be keeping track of.
4for4.com. If you DM me, as you mentioned, at DAiGLE on Twitter, even though our Halloween sale is up, I bet I can still get you a coupon code. I bet it. So just reach out and I'll hook you up. And then also you can subscribe to type in the most accurate podcast, those exact words, on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. And that's where I am, I think 3 or 4 times a week. It all blends together now. But either way, DFS show also on the 444 YouTube. I assure you, if you just look up John DAiGLE, I am out there in the ether somewhere.
Guys, this has been a blast. Make sure you drop in the comments your favorite trade today in the NFL. Maybe opportunity you see, whether it's dynasty or redraft, with what happened in the NFL today. Let us know how we can make this better for you. We want to help you keep on winning. And guys, good luck as we approach week 9. We'll check you all later.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's a... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Awesome pod, fellas. We covered a lot. That was good.
We got it all out.
Yeah.
Always fun when John comes on. We didn't hit some of the chat questions. We apologize. We'll hit you guys up next time. We appreciate the chat for sure. We just we had a lot to cover, man. All those trades happening today. It's hard to cover everything in John's an expensive man to get on the show, so we 90 minutes is all we can afford.
I mean, to be honest, I was looking. A lot of it has to do with what we talked about from the trade deadline, anyhow. Maybe like there's this Brock Wright, and we talked about Brock Wright on the show. Never mind, we literally hit on fucking everything. Never mind. Let's move on.
There you go.